Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1036, and today's date is July 31st, 2016, and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we have been tracking and following this economy, and since 2008, the U.S. government central bankers have been pushing the idea that we're making this a lot better. But we've been finding out that no, it's actually the opposite. They've been creating bubbles and making the economy even worse. And we're getting more and more proof of this, that the economy is deteriorating. It's collapsing right in front of our eyes. And we can see the entire system is starting to break down. Deutsche Bank Dominic Konstam says there's little evidence that productivity is ready to do any type of heavy lifting. He said with personal consumption expenditures surging at an annualized 2.8% rate, nearly triple that recorded in the first quarter, we are in big trouble. This means that the non-consumer part of the U.S. economy subtracted 1.6% from GDP growth in the second quarter. In fact, Deutsche Bank calculates that on an annual basis, the non-consumer portion of the economy is shrinking. It's in a recession. Not only in real terms, but also in nominal terms. This means that excluding the contribution from the U.S. consumer, the U.S. economy is now in a recession. Well, we know it's a lot worse than this. Because when we look at the economy, we have been tracking this. We've been looking at every sector of the economy, and each sector is proving that it's getting worse and worse as time goes on. Look at this. Business spending is in a recession. Equipment spending fell negative 3.5% in the quarter and is down negative 2% over the last year. Housing, residential investment declined by negative 6.1% last quarter. This whole thing is falling apart. Then we take a look at the GDP. GDP is continually declining. Now we know GDP has been manipulated. They included research and development going all the way back to the Depression of 1929. They calculated the numbers all the way back up to the present time. GDP includes Obamacare spending, and you know, as the premiums continually rise, guess what happens? GDP looks better and better. But everything is starting to break down now. Actually, Barack Obama remains on track to be the only president in all of U.S. history to never have a single year when the economy grew by at least 3%. Every other president in American history, even the really bad ones, had at least 1 year when U.S. GDP grew by at least 3%. And when we look at this, we see 2009, negative 2.8%, 2010, 2.5%, 2011, 1.6%, 2012, 2.2%, 2013, 1.5%, 2014, 2.4%, 2015, 2.4%. This year, not looking good whatsoever. It's actually getting worse. Now, Egypt, they need a bailout. A delegation from the International Monetary Fund, they have arrived in Egypt because they responded to a request for a multi-billion-dollar bailout. The country's economy is not doing anything right now. It is dead in the water. And what they're looking for a $12 billion loan from the IMF over 3 years, as well as a $7 billion from other sources. But there's a problem here. What they're going to need to do is that the Egyptian government is going to need to cut different areas in the country. Because according to the IMF, to receive this bailout money, there's certain preconditions. They have to meet criteria, and that is broad cuts across every program that they have running right now. And the people of Egypt, well, they don't like this. They don't like this. They don't like austerity whatsoever. And we might see riots and protests in the streets in Egypt. And this is something that we need to watch. Now, President Obama just signed something called the Dark Act, denying Americans the right to know. Obama signed into law S764. Now, the Dark Acts were a way to establish federal labeling. And realistically, it would banish all state labeling initiatives under a federal standard. White House simply mentioned a list of bills, and S764, which directs the Secretary of Agriculture to establish a national mandatory bioengineered food disclosure standard. And this was listed at the end here. The disclosure standard must be an inside joke because the disclosure involves the consumer having to scan a QR code on a food product to find out about genetically modified ingredients, or they'll have to call a 1-800 number. Now, these measures might not happen in another 5 years. So really, what we're seeing here is they're trying to delay the labeling of GM foods. They don't want the states to do it. And the consumerist notes that on this bill, it also directs the Secretary of Agriculture to eventually, at some point, 2 to 3 years maybe, come up with a national labeling standard. However, the standard could be incredibly weak and provide virtually no information to the consumer on the label whatsoever. Just Label It claims that the law allows the USDA to determine what GMO information is provided through the voluntary labeling system and will make it harder for companies like Campbell's Soup to voluntarily disclose the presence of GMOs. They also claim that the law would deny local governments from being able to protect farmers, rural residents, from environmental impacts of GMO crops. They don't want people to know. They don't want people to understand what's in their food. And if I'm eating something, just like you want to know what is in my food. Is it genetically modified organisms? Is it natural food? Is it organic? We have a right to know. And the government has no business whatsoever trying to keep this information from us. Now, it seems that a French delegation is going to visit Crimea. They want to see how the people are faring in Crimea, since now Crimea is part of Russia. And we can see that they are visiting now. This is the second time that they visited the peninsula. The referendum on Crimea's accession to Russia reflected the will of the people, and this is coming from the former transport minister, saying that the people in this country, it looks very peaceful. People seem to be very happy. And if this didn't happen, this area would have turned out to be like the southeastern area. The French people, they want to do away with the sanctions. It's hurting their economy. Actually, it's hurting Europe as a whole, and it's not getting any better. And there's many countries that are out there saying, you know something, we need to get rid of these sanctions. It's not helping us. And we're seeing a lot of these countries, like Italy, we're looking at France, even Germany is saying, you know something, we need to take another look at this. Now, the U.S., they had a surveillance plane, a Boeing OC-135B, and they had to make a landing in Russia. It was a forced landing. Now, the American crew detected a malfunctioning of the landing gear, and they asked permission to land in Russia. Now, they were supposed to use this plane to do an open sky flyover of Russia, but there are suggestions that the malfunctioning was not coincidental and perhaps related to recent military exercises in the area, and they're still looking into this. So this is a situation that we need to follow. We see the United States right now, they are deploying B-1 bombers to Guam. Now, this is the first time in nearly 10 years the Air Force will deploy a squadron of long-range B-1 Lancer bombers to Guam. Now, of course, we know what this is for. This is to provoke China. Now, there were B-52 bombers currently stationed in Guam. Now they're removing those and bringing in these B-1s. And they're saying this is to keep the region safe, secure, keep it stable. The question is, from what? No, the question is that they're using this to encircle China. And they want to bring in more of these bombers and place them in each one of the countries that is encircling China. And we can see what is happening right now. They're pushing and provoking China, just like North Korea, Russia, because they want something to happen. They want these countries to do something. They want war, period. Now, Turkish prosecutors, they claim that the CIA, FBI, they trained the coup plotters. Now, we know this to be true because this has happened many, many times before. And we can see right now that we're getting more indicators that Erdogan is pulling away from the West, and it's starting to look like Erdogan knew about the coup. The U.S. wanted Erdogan out of power to push their mission into Syria. Erdogan was not cooperating. Erdogan decided, let's move over to Russia, closer to there. And we're starting to see evidence now that most likely this is true, because just yesterday, Turkey surrounded the Incirlik air base. Of course, they're using the excuse that there could have been a second coup, but he arrested like 70,000 plus people that were involved in the first coup. Who is left to have a coup? Another excuse is it's a security operation, safety inspection. But there's 7,000 armed police with heavy vehicles that surrounded the base. And I think what he's getting prepared to do is he's getting prepared to tell the U.S. to get out of this area. And I think they're using this as a way of getting the U.S. out of Turkey right now. And it's really starting to look like the U.S. is having major, major problems in the area of Turkey, Syria, Iraq. And the U.S., their backs are against the wall right now. And we can see propaganda is starting to flow out of the United States to convince people that Russia is up to something and the U.S. is very worried about their maneuvers in Syria. The Russian deputy foreign minister, he completely denied allegations that Russia and Syria are preparing to storm Syria's Aleppo after clearing the civilians. Because remember, John Kerry said this humanitarian aid is a ruse. And we're seeing more of this propaganda come out right now. U.S. officials, they're saying that Russia and Syria, well, these safe corridors where they've invited an estimated 250,000 civilians trapped among all the fighting that's going on there to evacuate, may be part of a plan to depopulate the city so that the Syrian army can go in and seize the entire area. Now, the United States does not want Syria or Russia to seize Aleppo. It is a strategic location. And Russia is saying this is absolutely ridiculous. We've been following everything that we said we were going to follow. It's the United States that doesn't keep their end of the bargain. And this we know to be true. And what we're seeing right now is a point in time where the United States has very few options left. One, continue on this path, and Russia and Assad's forces continually clear out the country, take it back. The U.S. ends up with nothing. They have to leave Syria because what would be the reason for the United States to be in Syria at this point if the Islamic State is completely gone? There is no reason. They're having problems with Turkey. It looks like Erdogan is getting ready to remove the United States from its country, maybe even sever ties with NATO. We're seeing that the Iraqi forces in Iraq are actually clearing out the Islamic State. They have about 10% of the land left. So what does the United States do at this point? They can continue along this path. They can lose Syria, There's no reason to go into Iraq. They'll lose a lot of the Middle East because the people are fighting back. So they have two options, really, at this point. Go along with the present strategy. They'll just lose the entire area. The petrodollar will collapse, and we'll have the collapse, and we'll just blame it on the central bankers. Or they need some type of an event. They need a plan, and this is what everyone should be worried about at this point. Because the United States, they're at their end game. The economy's at its end game. And there's really no way out of this at this point. The only way to go forward with their goals, which they always seem to keep on, they don't seem to deviate from, is to do something. And this is what we need to be watching. We're heading into August. It is July 31st. Congress is going to be leaving Washington. They won't be back until after Labor Day. And from past history, we know that Obama seems to do everything during this period of time. Back in August of 2013, we had the sarin gas false flag. Move forward to 2014, all of a sudden, we had the Islamic State. 2015, during the same period, the United States decides they're allowed to go into Syria and to start bombing. Here we are in 2016. What is Obama ready to do? Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.